making a
saying
good
I
point.
have to poopy. They're not saying that because the context we're in calls for a different degree of the word.
I didn't mean. I paused him at the perfect time. Oh man, I gotta clip that. I've got to clip that.
You just start cussing me out immediately.
Oh, great start. Hey everybody, welcome to Reacting to Truth. I'm Ryan Schallenberger with Bradley Bean Bornhorst, and this is where we butcher quotes and we pose as philosophers, your main media source for Micah Allen Gunn media reaction material. And that's what we're getting back to today. I know we've had a couple of videos, one or two videos on us reacting to Galatians, and the people spoke, and they spoke loudly in the ways of not watching our videos that weren't involving Micah. So now we're going to react to a video today, and we have Bradley here. How are you doing, Brad?
Doing good. Feels good to be back doing it with you. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
agreed. And what video, or why did we choose the video? Maybe you can introduce it.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's a compelling title. Should Christians cuss? Micah. So I've seen this ahead of time. Ryan has not. So going to be fun to get his live take. And then it's been a little bit since I've seen it, so we'll see if maybe second time around if I feel differently or how the conversation goes. Should be fun.
Okay. Should Christians cuss? First, what's your reaction to the title? I mean, that's kind of provocative.
Yeah, I think I told you off air. He took it in a direction, I think, when I first listened to it that I wasn't expecting. Because it seems almost like a rhetorical question. Like, I think knee-jerk reaction is like, well, no, they shouldn't cuss. And so it's kind of like, oh, what are you going to say? But it was interesting. I think it's a great thought-provoking subject. What about you?
Cool. Yeah, no, I like it. I know Micah too well. He talks like a sailor. No, he doesn't. He's Micah's always had he's always had a clean mouth. So I found it interesting. I've never really even spoken to him on this subject, or maybe I have and I forgot about it. But it seems really interesting. And I mean, you're right. I mean, on knee-jerk reaction, I'm like, well, probably not, but I know Christians have cussed. I know Christians do cuss, and and what does that mean when you actually like let it slip in anger, let it slip in your mind? I've had conversations with folks where they're like, I'm doing good, like verbally. I didn't even mention this to you. It was actually a friend of ours, and he was basically saying like, I'm doing better, like with how I'm thinking, and like basically on his Christian journey. And he said, one thing I've struggled with is like when I do get angry or have those moments, like I think the word, and at that moment, and this was years ago and I was younger, at that moment I was like, dude, you're so far ahead of me. At that moment, because like you just think the word and you felt bad about that. Yeah. I was like, wow. And I remember that, and I was like, okay. And you have those moments when somebody says something like that and you're just like, man, I have a long way to go. And that was one of those moments, and it was specifically kind of like about cussing and about words, and like everybody stubs their toe, or you get a flat tire, or something comes to your mind, right? So
yeah,
I'm interested. So let's dive into it, and let's see what Micah has to say. Can you hear everything?
Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thank you very much for listening in. I really appreciate your time. We have got a great question today. Should Christians cuss? I love this question, love this discussion, love this conversation, because I think when we think critically about this, it's more challenging than you might expect on the surface. I probably will not answer this question as hard-lined as many of you would think that I should. Maybe some people think absolutely they should or could or can. Maybe some of you think absolutely they never should, could, or can. I'm not really going to be answering one way or another, but I do think that this is a more nuanced conversation than many people think that it is up front. I know most Christians would probably be like, cuss words are bad and wrong. The Bible explicitly talks against them, and so we shouldn't use them. This is not me defending the use of certain language as actively good, but I do hope to take a closer look at the topic of cuss words in general, and hopefully by the end of this, think a little less superficially about these words from a biblical context, especially. If we can do that, this will be a successful episode.
Sorry, a question just kind of popped in my head while he was talking. We've all heard words, right? We've all heard words, maybe even said them. I'm curious, do you remember kind of like the first times you've heard some words that maybe you didn't even know, or you were younger, or or even...
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't know if I remember the first time, but I certainly middle school is an interesting time. I would say that's probably roughly when you start getting exposed to like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What did you just say?
Are you talking about like 5th and 6th grade, kind of around there?
Yeah, probably about then. Maybe even like 7th and 8th too. So like that junior high. But yeah, probably that is when it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like I had an experience where I remembered this. I took the bus, and I think I heard words before this, but I certainly hadn't heard them like in the collection that they were being proposed to me by this one kid. And I got in this bus, I think it was 5th grade, and this kid sat next to me, and he's first of all, he smelled really bad. And I feel bad because I don't think he came from like the best area, or I shouldn't say, I mean, he's on my bus route, so we're kind of in a similar area, but he
was really in the slums.
But where we picked him up at, it was like the area was just different or whatever. It just didn't seem like he had the best area, and he didn't smell that great. Yeah. But for whatever reason, he sat next to me. I don't know if we had assigned seats. I don't remember, but he sat next to me. And I don't know if he was talking to his friends or like just talking to himself, but I just remember whenever he would just rattle off like these cuss words, right? And that was kind of like, I remember that because it was like exposing me. Like I grew up, we were talking off camera about how we grew up. I grew up a lot like you, where wasn't really in the household, don't even really get close to cussing, or you're gonna get. I mean, crap is a bad word, right, for us, right. Growing up, and I mean, still, like, I don't want my kids
now
saying
I can't share this with my parents because they'll be. I'm just kidding.
The FCC just took us off. That. Yeah. Ouch. No, you can't share. But I mean, you don't want your kids saying that word, right? Yeah. Or. A word that
I do. I feel like I'm probably more relaxed than my parents were, but there certainly are words that I'd be like, no, I'm not comfortable with you saying that. I don't know if crap probably is not one of them, but other words that are a little bit more strongly flavored.
Yeah, well, and I say this, my kids are younger. I mean, your oldest just turned 9, right? So if my 3-year-old is going around saying crap, I'm like, that's not cool. We shouldn't, like, what are we doing that she's saying those types of things? So, I mean, the worst words, and I've had this discussion with Rachel, because I'm like, they're cussing my kids because they don't know all the words, but they're using the worst words they know at us. And I'm like, that's basically like their intent. Maybe Micah will get into that. I'm like, their intent, like, because they're saying poo-poo head, right? That's the strongest word they know, and they're using it. So that's like me walking around saying the strongest words I know, and so it's like, I don't know. That's just an interesting argument, but we can keep Micah going. Sorry.
Because I think we often do think very superficially, like this word is wrong, this word is right. And I don't know that that's what the Bible is outlining. So first, Before we kind of get into this, I want to make a few statements that just kind of bother me about this whole conversation. I think we need to stop calling them curse words or swear words, especially in a biblical context, because those are, in my opinion, really outdated terms. And honestly, historically, they've been called that, like these terms, curses or swear words, have been applied to some of these, like, you know, words that we all know, but I'm not going to say out loud on the internet. They've been applied to those words so that we kind of think of them as taboo, or especially spiritually taboo. Certain words like damn or hell, sorry if that offended anybody, those words have.
All right, we're done. That's it.
Yeah.
We can't keep going. Sorry. We'll keep them going.
In the past been used to like pronounce evil judgment on somebody with your words. So I can see how that would fall under this heading of like maybe it used to be a curse or a swear or something like that. But when we're talking about morality, especially biblical morality, dropping the F-bomb is not the same thing as taking an oath or swearing. And there is a word for that in the Bible. Dropping an F-bomb is not the same as working within the spiritual realm to proclaim harm on a person or a curse. It's not that. It is a word that we might be uncomfortable with. It might be a word that offends people, but it's not a swear. It's not an oath, and it's not a curse. So I don't like those words personally, even though the word cuss comes from.
That's kind of interesting, Brad, because don't you think sometimes I can understand the word curse word because cussing, man, this is such a weird conversation, but cussing, like, it can be directed at people, and that's where it seems like it's cursing, right? But then if you stub your toe and drop the F-bomb, as Micah says, then that is not like cursing. Like, people, and they say like, I'm going to get after you, fill in the blank, right? Or I'm coming after you, like, and then you're such a blank, right? Mm-hmm. So I can understand why it's called cursing in that context. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think he does get into intent, like malicious. Using a word maliciously would not be good. If I remember correctly, I think he kind of gets into that. Okay. Which I'll let him speak to it, and then we can talk more about it. But that does make sense. Yeah, I'm curious to hear because he's about to say, I think, how cuss, I think, etymologically, what's the word?
I think
the etymology of a
there you go.
of it. Cuss, I think, comes from curse, I think is what he was about to say. But
oh, okay. Let's keep
the
rolling.
Word curse. I still like it better when referring to some of these terms because it's taken on its own connotations. No one hears the word cuss and thinks like I'm pronouncing a magical curse upon you or something like that. And so that's the word I'm going to use when we talk about, some of these words that I'm going to try my best not to say out loud. Full disclosure, I do sometimes say cuss words and I don't really feel all that bad about it. There are times I use them and do feel bad about it. But not every time I use a word that's considered a cuss word do I think of it as a morally evil or reprehensible thing. We'll get into that in just a minute.
Okay, question for you. Have you used words and then felt bad about you using those words, whether it's a cuss word, curse word, or close? Have you felt bad about that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, not super often. Not trying to toot my own horn, but I try to be careful with my words. My bigger struggle, I feel like, is not so much using cuss words, but just general like anger or bitterness, maybe. So like it's a different struggle. Like, cool, I could not say cuss words, pat myself on the back, great for you, but that doesn't mean that I don't struggle in other areas. That could be worse, and I think that's his overall point, which is interesting, that we could put a lot of weight on words and think that it's the word itself that is bad, but it's really the action or intent that underlies it. And that it's almost like Jesus' teaching. Like, it's not just about not killing somebody. Don't harbor hatred in your heart to where you can't even stand the sight of them. Otherwise, you want to kill them. Like, you might not have done it, but you've kind of done it. And so I do think it makes a lot of sense, the argument he's making, because again, cool, maybe I don't struggle with cussing all the time, but do I have things within me that could be just as bad or worse or whatever, somewhere on that spectrum? For sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, good point. Good point.
Second, God does tell us in Scripture to refrain from certain types of speech, namely coarse jesting, empty speech, filthy speech, things like this. The verses we could go to are like Ephesians 5, verse 4, which says, "Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving." I want to note that it does give you an alternative thing that should be filling your speech. Colossians 3, verses 8 to 10 says, "But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator." And likewise, in this verse, a few verses later, it talks about what that new self looks like. It says it's compassionate, kind, humble, meek, patient, forgiving, loving, peaceful, and harmonious. Now, I realize that we look at these verses as explicit polemics against cuss words. And in a way, I agree with you, and in a way, I disagree with you. Because it's important to note that so much more than just filthy speech is mentioned that we know is not good, but don't take nearly as seriously. Filthy speech being the thing that most people would say is attributed to cuss words, things like that. But what about empty speech? What about angry words? What about slander against others?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's such a good point, because we definitely have a tendency to do that, and I'm not even using the term "we" in any certain context. I'll just say me. I know I could do that, where it's easy to focus on one thing that, again, maybe is like your source of pride. Because the Colossians scripture is something that has stuck with me ever since I was younger, I feel like. And that would drive me to not cuss. Would be like, Colossians 3:8 says, don't let filthy language come from your mouth, paraphrasing a little bit, but essentially that. And I would focus on that, and again, forget the broader context of what's it talking about, or what other things am I focusing on them as well just as much, or am I just wearing this shiny badge of not cussing and thinking that I'm something great because of it. So I just thought that was a great point that he brings out, that, again, maybe this is a good proof text in part, but we can't just isolate it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like letter of the law versus the intent type of argument. What do you think that empty speech, like, that's catching my attention now, right? Like, what do you think is meant by that biblically? Having not done any type of research into the wording or even in the translation, I don't even know what that's translated from, because this is New Testament, right? So that'd be Greek, but what do you think kind of is meant by that?
That's a good question.
Empty speech.
I could be wrong, but my gut wants to go towards like flattery, and flattery might be different too, but something that's like empty or vain, or so when I think of flattery, like you're doing it to gain some sort of a whatever feeling or emotion or value from somebody, so you're flattering them to get them kind of on your side, or whatever it might be. To me, that would be in the camp of empty speech, where it's like, well, you don't actually mean it, you're just using flattery.
That's a great point. Yeah,
something in that nature, I would think. But again, I could be wrong, because it's a great question. I wish I had better knowledge of that word.
No, I'm just posing it for us to kind of discuss right now. It's like empty speech versus like there's scripture that says it's speech with salt, basically.
Yeah. So
it's like basically you eat something and it's just nothing, versus like, okay, this has like seasoning and this is great. And that's, I think you're really alluding to that with like people especially in like the business world, right? Where they go around, you're like, hey, this guy, look at this guy. Wow, this guy is the best vice president we've ever had, and just blowing smoke type of
Yeah.
folks, whether it's
Yeah.
for their own selfish gain to get a sale or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, or, I think that you're probably right. It has no purpose really, or no good purpose.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
either no
No
purpose
substance.
or no substance or no there's no salt as we have said. And I think also empty speech can be those who are just very talkative too, that just talk, and it's just nothing. There's no purpose. And like the word salads also, it's like I feel like that's empty speech, where you're just kind of being diplomatic and talking around questions and kind of being politically correct and
Yes.
saying, well,
Yeah, that's a
there's
great
that, but we also have to consider this side as well, and that point of view. It's just like, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a great example too, or like that made me think of like the vain repetition. So don't be like the Pharisees and hypocrites who just utter the same things over and over. Like that would be, I would think, empty speech. Where, again, where's the substance? What are you actually driving at? Yeah, really, really interesting.
Come, we'll keep them rolling.
Or lies. We could say these are bad things, but we're not as scandalized by them. If someone speaks out in anger, we're not quite as scandalized than if they say certain words that seem to trigger certain reactions from us. And so I do want to say that these verses do talk about being careful with our speech, but I don't know that we're exactly reading the entire verse. Instead, we just use them to say, see, you shouldn't say the F word or the S word or the A word, whichever word starts with whatever letter you want to use. We shouldn't say those things. But really, it's talking about all kinds of different speech to avoid. So I don't want us to pigeonhole it to say it's just saying don't use these certain words, especially because how often are our words, our speech, our language absent the things it tells us to be full of? Even if we're not using cuss words, how often can we say that our words are actively compassionate, kind, humble, meek, patient, forgiving, loving, peaceful, harmonious? Sometimes we just speak. And I don't know that we're doing the active part of these commands. We'll get into that in just a minute, though. Ephesians 4:29 also states, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but instead only that which edifies or builds up. So in all of these verses, it's not just don't do this. It's saying fill your speech with this.
Yeah, I like what Micah's really saying. And I think where people get offended, which with cussing, is because it's like it's kind of like having a bit of a scarlet letter, being very outward with something that's just like obvious. It shows like there's an underlying issue, basically, where it's like, oh, okay, so if you're really loose with your words, you're probably not, taking to heart the scriptures that Mike is talking about, which is being careful with your words in general, not being empty with them. So I think it just kind of, it's like almost where you see the tip of the iceberg type of thing, if that makes sense. If people are being kind of loose with their words, and then we make judgments and are like, okay, well, this guy, that type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
So there's an active portion of these verses. The opposite of filthy language then is edifying language, not just no cuss words, right? That's the point I'm trying to make here. Often I think we believe we're fulfilling commands by abstaining from what we believe the command to be about. But so often the Bible tells us what our active part must be, which often informs or should inform or tell us about the heart of the verse in question. And so often we ignore the active part, which actually gives us an indicator about what the negative part means or intends to be speaking about. The purpose of our speech is to build relationships, to build others up, and to reflect God. In all of these verses, that is very consistent. Now, I also realize many people are probably hearing this so far and thinking, okay, yeah, there's plenty that I could do better with my speech, But Micah, you're really far away from convincing me that I'm not at least halfway there by removing cuss words from my vocabulary. All right, that's all good. If that's the place you're at, if all I've gotten you to do is think a little more critically on those verses and realize that they don't just say, don't say cuss words, they say, put on good speech, which looks like these things, that's great. But again, this whole episode is not meant to convince you that cuss words are good. I don't want you to go from a place of feeling like I should not say cuss words to then saying, oh, I should be saying them all the time. No, that's not the purpose of this. It's to get us to think critically about what the Bible actually says and how we interpret it, to think a little less superficially about this topic.
Yeah, I think he's doing a great job of that. And also, like, when he's talking, just in general, when you bring up this topic, it makes you think, like, I should just be better with my words in general. So I appreciate Micah, shout out to Micah, for bringing this topic up, because it's just overall, like, I can have empty speech. I can have poor intentional speech. I can have my speech is often, especially on, like, tonight's the Sabbath when we're recording this. When we go to church, what is my speech when I go to church? Am I edifying always? Am I just talking about the sports of the last week? Right. That's the language that's coming out of my mouth. So I appreciate him bringing this up, because it makes you mindful of words that you are producing on a daily basis.
To me, it kind of, like the term low-hanging fruit. I feel like it's easy to get sucked into almost like a cheap Christianity, where you're like, okay, I'm going to do all the low-hanging fruit. I won't cuss. Cool, I'm good. And I think what you're nailing at is that could be one part of it. What about either the positive aspects or the other negative aspects to avoid? Like, are we actually making sure that we're making gains? Or, again, just to use myself as an example, if I don't struggle with cussing, is that all that I focus on, or do I evaluate myself? And I guess I'm kind of repeating now, so I'll cut it. But it is a good point, and I think that should be the larger value and lesson to take from it.
Yeah, who knew you could learn so many valuable lessons from a video about cussing?
Topic of speech and cuss words. Now, what I will say, however, is that none of these verses, and none of the ones we even could go to regarding speech, are explicitly outlawing the S word, the F word, the A word, or any other letter of word that we can think of. It is not saying thou shalt not say this syllable or this phrase. It's not saying that. This might seem like semantics. This portion of the argument is kind of where I end up losing people in this, because it feels like semantics, but the Bible is written in Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, and no one speaking those languages would have the foggiest idea of what you were meaning if you just walked up to them and dropped a cuss word in American English and then walked away out of the blue. They wouldn't know. If you walked up to Paul and just said, damn it, he would have no clue what you're saying, because the language wouldn't translate. He spoke Greek, and he was very familiar with Hebrew as well. But the English word, damn it, would not mean anything to him. And so it's not the word itself. It's not the letters in that combination. It's not the syllables. It's not as your lips form around the pocket of air that you're pushing out as your vocal cords vibrate and your tongue is shaping the word into a certain thing, and that's somehow more evil than if you were to say puppies. It's not that. I think we need to at least agree on that it's not the...
Why does he seems, we've done a few of these, he seems a little bit more passionate.
He does. I would agree. He's been thinking about this one. He's had it in his pocket.
Well, my theory is maybe something slipped around somebody, and he's formulated this argument.
He's got a defense.
Yeah. No, love you, Micah. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep you going.
Physical letters or sound you're making that is being talked about in some of these verses about pure speech. And the reason I say this is because it should cause us to ask, okay, then, what is obscene and why is it obscene? As far as what these people are talking about in Scripture. Paul, Jesus, James, Peter, any of the people, any of the biblical authors who spoke about language and good speech could not have meant a certain set of syllables, physical syllables, are more profane or less profane than other ones. That's not what is being talked about here. We inherently actually know this. We know that words are very highly cultural. Years ago, the word bonfire would be hated by the Christian community because it goes back to the words bonefire, which is a pagan practice. So if anytime you said, hey, let's have a bonfire, they'd think you're inviting them to a pagan ritual. They'd be like, absolutely not. You're a heathen. You're evil. You're awful. Don't say those words. Don't even invoke them in my presence. It would be very, very offensive, but it's not today. Years ago, the word nice meant whorish or a loose woman. It does not mean that today. All of us say the word nice and think it's a positive thing. It's not only switched from like very negative to neutral, it's switched from very negative to very positive. It's a compliment to give someone. Years ago, the word damn was the most offensive cuss word in the Christian community, while words like the F word were relatively in common use, even within the religious community. It wasn't like a religious word, but it wasn't offensive in society.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I remember listening to that the first time and being like, that's so interesting because I've never heard that before, but I'll take his word for it.
I'll take his bleeping word for it. No, sorry, that's bad. Well, he said I could, no. But
Right,
that's,
feeling free.
I just can't, I need my big glass of water. I just can't believe, well, Micah's so right, 100% right. A lot of this is cultural. But there's something comedic and slightly inappropriate to think about,
Sure.
a couple of hundred years ago, people walking around just dropping the F-bomb. I don't know the etymology of that word. I don't know where it came from. I don't know when it came about. I thought it was relatively more popular, like as far as like more modern day, like 1950s plus type of thing. I didn't know it was even around too much, but I don't know much about word history. I did have a question for you. That have you been into a situation where you, like Micah, like you learned, whether it's either like a culture or a different language, where you kind of learned that certain a word or a phrase or something was offensive and you just like had no idea?
I don't think I have. Have you? Nothing comes to mind immediately.
Well, I guess it's not necessarily like a cultural thing, but the Bible does say something about the word like fool, right? So if what's the verse where I think Jesus is actually saying like if anybody says to his brother, "You fool," what is the word, like raka or something? You fool,
like that, yeah.
and he is in danger, type of thing. So
I think the meaning of it was like it invoked like somebody that had no value, like it was getting at a point of like, oh, you're worthless, you're meaningless, you have no value. I'm sure it was stronger than that, but I think that was the general sense. But
we encountered people, and they've been great people to us. But I've known people that the actual word like fool was like probably more offensive to them than certain curse words because of that verse.
Now that you mention that, one does jump into my mind, and this is something that we wouldn't have. I don't think I shouldn't. I don't know. I don't know if we would have come around to this conclusion otherwise. I mean, culture and society do change, but the word retarded is something that now, having a child with special needs, you do look at it differently, and I would say it impacts my wife even more than me. And not that I don't like the word or when people use it, but if somebody uses it around her, it's all she can do to not say something and try and explain. And again, I think culture is shifting, but you definitely still hear that from time to time. And some people do mean it in a derogatory sense, and then others it's just common vernacular where you're just throwing it out there and you don't even think about it.
Yeah, but you're not
So that
using
would
it
probably be
typically
what I just
in a
came up with,
positive
but-
sense. No, that's a great
Correct.
example.
Yeah, correct.
You're
Yeah.
not, yeah, you're not saying like, yeah, this
Yeah,
this
it's never
Coke I'm
meant to be.
drinking is, yeah, like, yeah, it's.
Right.
But isn't that weird though? Because it's like some words do change from like bad to good, like saying stupid, but it's
Yeah.
like it was stupid cool. Like that has been a
Yeah.
phrase like that.
Sure.
This burger's stupid. I could be completely
Yeah.
wrong, but like you could say like stupid was cool,
Yeah.
and like fat change PHAT. I think all of my my word changes are from like the 90s or
Yeah.
even 80s before my time, but.
Yeah.
It's making a good point, but yeah, they sometimes they change
Mm-hmm.
from positive to good, or right now they could still have like a positive meaning and a negative meaning, like the same word,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's just based upon the context.
Yeah. Yeah. Another
Yeah.
one would be, again, similar realm. Like I think to use the word like midget is frowned upon. I think now the accepted word referring to somebody, I think with dwarfism, if that's the correct, I think that's the correct, but it would be to just call them little people. I think is the right way to
Is it
say
though?
that.
Because so
Dang.
have you heard of these brand of toys called Little People?
I don't think so.
It's a brand. They're very popular. We have a lot of them, and it's just literally little people. You can get little
Hmm.
people characters like Cinderella. You can
Okay.
get little people. Rachel collects them for. I'm not trying to out her as like a bigot, but she's not. But
Well,
there's
yeah, I
like
don't
little
think
people office characters and like.
I think little
Um,
people is the correct one though.
but I'm saying, why is this brand calling themselves Little People? It's so weird to
Well,
me.
maybe, yeah. But is it designed to support that community and people?
Could be. I haven't looked into it. I've been
It could, that
posturing
that's
as
what I would
offended for
assume.
moral gain. But
Well, I would assume I could be wrong, but I would assume it would be in some way trying to support or bring awareness to that community by giving them a space in the toy market. But I could be totally wrong.
you might have cracked the code. I have not looked into it at all. I'm just, so maybe you're right.
I've never even heard of it. I heard of that.
I just thought it was
And
weird.
that's where like
Yeah.
I know the politically correct sphere can go down some ditches, but that maybe we wouldn't always agree with. But there certainly are, I think, good instances of it where it makes sense to
Yeah.
to use the proper and preferred language and things. But
Yeah, like I believe in freedom of speech, and if you offend somebody, you shouldn't go to jail. But at the same time, oh boy, this is gonna get us into a weird argument. That's, you know what? I'm gonna revoke that argument. Let's not get into that. I'm just gonna revoke it. I'm unqualified. I don't want to talk about it. Okay.
yeah,
All right. Let's keep Micah rolling.
That time, our attitudes towards these words have all changed within American English, which is a relatively new language as far as languages go. Nice is not an obscene word because culturally it does not mean something obscene anymore. I probably couldn't even convince you to stop using the word nice. It sounds ridiculous to you to be like, well, I'm not going to play by the rules of, this ancient American society that believed nice was a bad word, because that's not how I mean it anymore. So even if you know the origins, you know that word now means something totally different, and you're not going to stop using it. However, if someone from back in that time, when the word nice meant something like whorish or a loose woman, came back to life today, and you said the word nice in front of them, and they acted all scandalized, just horrified that you would use a word like that. They gasped for air and were about to faint. You would probably apologize. You might not know at first what you're apologizing for, but once you know that you've offended them, you probably would apologize to them because your intent was not to offend. Your intent was not to use a filthy word, but that's how they received it. I think this shows that the thing that is obscene behind a certain set of syllables is the idea that the word is communicating and the perception or the reception of the person who receives that communication. This is the thing that's obscene, not the syllables, not the physical word itself, the idea behind the word and how it's received by the person it's being communicated to. In America, like in any other culture, certain words have become taboo, but this changes over time, and we are all susceptible to that. We're all living proof of that. So cuss words are just words that we currently socially agree are off color and generally offensive. But there will not always be agreement on what is offensive and what is not, especially as generation.
Oh, sorry. Did you have something to say on that?
I'm trying to think if it's worth disagreeing a little bit, because I don't disagree with his overall point. So that's where I'm like trying to weigh it in my mind, like, because I feel like if he was in the room with us, he would clarify and we'd all be on the same page. But just to try to play the other side a little bit, the only thing I would say, and again, I don't think he would disagree with me. He would probably have a really good counter. Mike is just a good debater. He's good on his feet. But
no,
anyways,
this is Micah. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but this is
No.
Micah, like in his prime right here.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you could tell he loves tinkering with things,
Yeah.
and this is like him. Like I remember growing up with him. This is him, like just pulling at little strings and like he's
thought
in
it
his
through.
Yeah,
He's not off the cuff. He's had some years.
yeah. This is good stuff.
No,
Go
that's
ahead.
why we love
continue.
him though, because of these. He brings out this just like thoughts and arguments and sides to things that I wouldn't normally think of. But anyways, what I was going to say is that yes, it's cultural, but that doesn't necessarily, like, I think I'm trying to think how to explain this. Because he's making the point that things change, and someday the F word or the B word or A word, whatever, could be completely normal, and it's substituted by a whole new set of swear words, which probably wouldn't be shocking if that was even in the near future, because kids grow up and they say all sorts of words that we've never heard of because we didn't grow up in their generation, and so there could be a new era of cuss words that are way more vulgar and suddenly replace some of the other ones that could become, less offensive or whatever. But because it is now, and we do still hold those as generally offensive, I think that is reason to show. And again, he's made it very clear he's not saying, hey, we should be free to cuss. So that's why I hesitated to even raise a counterpoint, because I know his overall point is not trying to argue for cussing and why we can or should cuss.
Right.
Yeah. Now I'll close it there, because again, I don't think we're different on here, but I guess the point he's making, I'm looking at it going, yeah, but we are in this cultural moment, just like nice, even though it's weird to us. Back then, if that really was the case, then yeah, maybe you wouldn't say that, because if it was meant to allude to something, it would make sense to avoid that word in that culture, in that context.
Right, because we're also called not to offend. I mean, we are called not to offend, and if it's something and we're called not to be easily offended at the same time. But I think he would, if his video closes with that argument, maybe if it was longer, he would agree with that, right? So if something is generally considered offensive, just like words of affirmation and love certainly have changed over years and years and years, right? So we attribute meaning to words. So I'm sure there's different ways to be affectionate and kind that have changed over time, that we maybe don't use those past words, but we use these words now. It doesn't mean that they don't have meaning or hold weight to them. So because of the society that we live in now. But again, you're right. He probably wouldn't disagree with that.
No, I don't think. Yeah, and that's where, again, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with us always agreeing with him and taking his side, but sometimes it's fun to try and see, like, where would I maybe have a different take or whatever. But
to poke around.
One other quick note that I feel like just sparked based off what you said there last is, like, I've heard people say the word love is so diluted and washed out because we use it for everything. I love pancakes. I love this pencil. I love baseball. Like, we use love in such a any day, anything. It can mean anything. So words are fascinating. It is amazing how they change and how culture affects it. Love back in the biblical time was different than, I mean, it had different words for different expressions of it. So yeah, it is interesting. There's a lot to it.
But everything is context, right? Is it 100% context? I would argue possibly not. So, like, if you put up a hypothetical situation, if you're alone walking and just talking to yourself, and you're just saying, "Man, I really got to get some effing things done today," or just you start talking in that mode, and you're alone, right? And you're not you're just kind of. It's hard to say. So is that wrong if there's little to no context with it, rather than screaming the F word at somebody in traffic, right? To me, I might have to disagree with Micah slightly. I think just because we exist in this society, in the reality that we exist in now, that the word will always have some type of meaning to it, even besides the context. Does that argument make sense? Like,
so just
love.
Clear, so you're saying.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say.
On a little delay. But...
I thought I was echoing. Yeah. Well, love is very contextual, like you just said. I love pancakes is so different than I love my wife, right?
Yeah.
But the word love still has some type of definitional meaning. If I just say love, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think in some ways,
There's
so does the F
attributed
word.
To it. Yeah.
Yes, so does the F word, right? I think maybe I'm making this argument on the spot, but I think there is some meaning to that word. It's not just it's not the word like because or library or dog. It's not that. Those words have meanings too, but
right.
I don't think it's
because you could ask yourself, like, why in that. Sorry, I hope I'm not cutting you off. We're a little bit delayed.
You're good,
but you could ask yourself, okay, in that scenario, if you said I got to get some blank things done, you could ask, why do I feel the need to say that? Why can't I just say, and I need to get some things done? Why insert that particular word?
Yeah.
And maybe the reasons would vary. And obviously way different to say it that way versus like, hey, go F, you, man, like, forget you, blah, blah, blah. Like, that would be totally opposite. So clearly there is a distinction or a diversity of severity, but to your point, and I would, I think, agree, you could still ask yourself, well, why use that word? Why not just say something else? Am I trying to evoke something to it by using that particular word?
Yeah. Thank you. I think you make my point better. I appreciate that. With your words. Let's see what Micah has to say.
Things progress, and there's a transfer from one generation to the next, and times change and people change. The words and language changes, and so what is offensive is also going to change. Cultural norms change, which in effect changes how we view speech. So did Paul mean in all these verses we quoted before, don't use the F word? Not specifically. He did not mean that. But that word can be offensive to a large majority of people because that's the culture we live in. So you do need to be careful about what you say, about what words you use, and to who you use them to. Because Paul also talks a lot about not needlessly causing others offense just because you
Right.
believe something to be acceptable behavior. That's not
Yep.
okay. Even if it's right and okay for you to do, it doesn't mean you need to avail yourself of that right when it bothers somebody else. Now, if it's good to do and someone's bothered, that's a little bit different. We can have a separate discussion about that. But if it's just like, well, you know, I think it's fine, so I'm just going to use it wherever and whenever I want. No, that's not appropriate and not acceptable. That is a heart issue that you're just trying to needlessly offend people, and you're not considering someone who might be bothered by something. And it's not wrong for them to be bothered by it culturally. That's okay. So we still need to be careful about what we say. But interestingly, it's Paul, one of the biggest proponents of clean language, who often gets interpreted as saying, don't use cuss words, that actually uses a word that culturally would have been very, very crass to his readers. And he does it, which I think is even more funny, in Philippians chapter 3, which is one of the most encouraging books ever. In Philippians 3:8, he says he counts all things that he has gained in his past skibalon in comparison to Christ. That word skibalon, often translated in some translations as rubbish or refuse. And this word does mean refuse, trash, or dung, but it's something more heinous than those things. Those English words don't really get across the connotation that Paul was using. This is something disgusting, filthy. Essentially, Paul is saying, I count these things as, pardon my French, shit. That's what I count them as. I hate to be...
I'm just thinking.
He got you there.
No, I think you could frame it as that, but like at the same time. So yeah, I would like to look into that because like
Yeah.
the S word is slang. So like I think there's a difference between like slang and like powerful harsh words. So like trash or rubbish, they're strong. They're pretty strong words. So I mean, I'll look into it, and because I'm like, what if Paul literally just meant like trash, right? And but you can use the S word as like a slang for trash, and trash is still kind of like a strong word. But I mean, I'll take his word for it. He said that skibalong word, and maybe yeah. So possibly the actual definition of it is like, hey, this was actually kind of like used as a slingy type curse word for the day. Yeah. So I don't know. I'll have to take a look. So it's interesting.
It is super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to look at that later. Skibalong word study. I'm probably not.
so bold about using that word. I said I wasn't going to use cuss words, and I'm really trying to thread this needle very carefully because I'm not trying to offend people, but this is a better connotation of what Paul is saying here, and I want to be honest about that. This word was something that was a shocking degree of certain lesser words, which ultimately is what cuss words are, right? And we know that he's using a harsh degree because he already said that these things are something bad. He said he counts them as loss. The word there is zemian, but he steps it up in the next sentence. He says he counts them as nothing. He counts them as detriment. He counts them as excrement. He's building and building and building, really trying to show that everything in comparison to Christ is worthless. In Greek, he could have used the word kopria, which means manure. We find that in Luke 13, verse 8. In Greek, he could have used the word riparion, which means moral filth, James 1, verse 21. In Greek, he could have used the word sesepen, which means rotten or rotted, found in James 5, verse 2. Lots of words Paul could use to communicate something filthy or unclean, but he actively chose a word that is a bit extreme because he is communicating something extreme. The same way that when a child has a full diaper, you might say they've poopied, right? Or they've got poopy because it feels lighter. It feels more playful. You're not going to go tell a child like you crapped yourself. You're not going to say that. You're going to say poopy because it feels lighter. But no adults go around.
Well, now we know what Micah would actually say. So about his child. All right. He's making
saying,
a good
I
point.
have to poopy. They're not saying that because the context we're in calls for a different degree of the word.
I didn't mean. I paused him at the perfect time. Oh man, I gotta clip that. I've got to clip that. Like I have
That
to.
could be our intro.
Ah,
how we, how we do the first 5 second bit. That could be it.
man, this episode is gold mine for our intro. I mean, he's been cursing. He said I had to poopy. Oh man, this is good. All right, he's doing well. Let's keep going.
That's a little bit more fact-based or a little bit more formal. If you somehow fell into a pile of cow poop, might it be appropriate to say that you're covered in, the word that comes to mind there? The word is shocking, but it also actively communicates a level of severity that the experience itself might call for in accurately communicating what is going on. All right, we got to wrap this up. That is pretty much my spiel. But words themselves, physical.
He knows what he did. He knows what he's doing. He's laughing right there. He's having a. He's like, we got through it. We
himself.
I think he did because, man, he's really, and he's always been good at this. He's great at formulating arguments. He's so good. I mean, even partly what I was questioning about that one word, he kind of like created a nice little argument to rebuttal it before, when I paused it. So, do you want to let him close up, or do you have anything to say?
Yeah. So I think, again, just to play the other side a little bit, I would say chances are that was, we know based on scripture that was kind of a one-off scenario. So if he was using it to make a very specific point, to draw a specific theology, it's more just a being careful with, like, I get his argument, but I would be careful with the argument. And I realize that I'm probably coming off as more traditional and a little bit more like, I don't know, but I think Paul was probably insanely careful with his words. Not even just saying cussing, but like as he's writing letters, he's probably thinking through, how am I going to communicate this? And so, it doesn't take away the shock value. It doesn't take away the, like, whoa, did he actually just say that? I can't believe Paul just said that. But if anything, that would almost support I would think that would support the carefulness with which because he's not just using it in everyday language. He's using it in a very specific circumstance to make a very specific, serious argument.
Yeah. You make a good point, because I think Micah's, I agree with him. I just think that his argument could be extrapolated, especially when he was talking about you're covered in manure, I think, that might be an appropriate setting. Well, you can extrapolate that more and more.
It totally makes sense why people would say stuff like that in those circumstances. Like, that's where you got to be a little bit like, okay, get off your high horse. Like, don't be above like that. If that happened to you, there's almost some humor in it, to where, again, it's not taken as seriously as if you use other words. So it's hard because there are different severities, and we all know there's different words that would carry more weight than others. But
I do think, but combining kind of your argument and the fact of, like, I think part of what almost gives us superpowers as Christians is when we're in situations where that call for normal carnal reactions, and when we don't, if that makes sense. Basically, in the heat of a moment, whether through frustration, anger, fear, or whatever, that we don't act the way that humans are supposed to act, or expecting to act, because of the Spirit of God that is leading us. So that would be one of my arguments against that. So it's like, okay, so if you get in an accident in traffic, or you're covered in poop and everybody sees you, well, just how can you rise above it? And yes, I'm not saying never use those words, because there might be a time where you really need to get a point across, where you're trying to invoke fear, the fear of God in someone, for them to listen to God and say like, "Hey, let me get this point across." And so you use a word that you've never used, and you say, "You better believe this," type of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
that maybe there's appropriateness there, but I do believe in like normal kind of flippant situations, we are kind of called to rise above, whether it's through language or and how we act. It's the combo of everything, just to be different and rise above it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what he says.
Syllables and sounds are not in and of themselves evil. Intent is evil. When someone is offended or scandalized, whether for good reason or not, I think we need to do something to make that situation right. We do need to be careful about our speech because everything that comes out of our mouths will be held to account one day. Are we using our speech to lift up others, to communicate effectively and truthfully, to reflect God? Or did we use our language to offend, to shock just for the sake of shocking, or to tear people down? Personally, if someone said to me, "Micah, I hate your guts and I hope you die," I'd be much more offended than if someone said, "Damn, Micah, it's good to see you." I don't really care that one of these sentences has a cuss word in it and one of them doesn't. The heart that is reflected in each is clear, and I believe one of these sentences much more accurately represents filthy speech, and the other, at least to me, in spite of the cuss word, does not.
Okay. I see what he's saying.
Yeah.
I would say I agree with most of it. I think on the balance scale of like justifying cussing, he might go a little too far. Just like a smidge, right? Because it's
Sure.
like, you know,
Well, at
what,
the end,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, at the end, again, I do. The only reason I have a hard time with it at the end there, that example, is it's two two very different greetings. Somebody
Yeah.
who's coming at him with spite, but at the same time, if somebody was coming at him with spite and was cussing, it would elevate it. I would think. Maybe he
Yes.
would disagree, but so yeah. If
But
somebody
one is
said,
worse. We agree. One is worse, but
yeah,
why do we I agree. I agree. And like if and people say that to me, they've said it to you, I'm sure. Like, hey, yeah, how
yeah,
the H are you type of
yeah.
thing. And
But and
it's
that's
like
where to give him credit, because I do think he's right, and I think that's where you're feeling too is he's doing a very good job at pointing out these are at the end of the day just words, and what matters is the intent. So certainly, certain conversations or statements will be worse or not worse, for lack of better words, uh, depending on the context and intent. So that point is very well made, and I
yeah.
think is good food for thought for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with his overall point, but part of me is starting to think he made this video just so he can cuss online.
It was. I love it though because it's a little edgy and it's thought provoking, and
It's
so
edgy. Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna get some conversations and some reaction out of it, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. He was definitely a little bit charged there.
Oh yeah,
He seemed like and I know, actually, I know of even specific instances where he's gotten called out for, um, I don't want to air his laundry on here, actually.
go on,
No,
please.
no, no, no. It's something that he makes a
No, no,
great point about because Micah's a great guy and
yeah,
he is about intent. And
yeah,
that's where his heart is always been about is
hmm
what does serving and what is the core of the
yeah.
matter, right? And
And to that, I
he's
would
right.
say he's 100% correct.
He's
Because
100% correct. Yes.
yeah, again, it goes. I'll say it again to sound like a broken record. I can think myself pious and good if I don't struggle with cussing, or if I choose to actively not use, and maybe fall more traditional or careful great.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually say anything about me as a human. I could still be terrible with my thoughts or say or do other things that are worse. So it's, yeah, to just make sure that I'm not coming off as somebody who pretends that they've got it better because I don't say cuss words. That, number one, I still will occasionally have a slip, so I'm not perfect in that regard even. But it's a good, it was a great video, Micah. Great video, really, really good content. He is awesome at forming arguments, and he's a good debater.
Yeah, and you made us think about our words in general. That, yeah, not just even cutting out some bad words, but the words that I use on a daily basis should truly have meaning.
Yeah.
Because just like our days are numbered, our words are numbered too. So, great job, Micah. We love you, and keep on. I was gonna say keep on cussing, but no, keep on making those videos. All right, thanks everybody.
Yeah. Till next time.